always shitty. You know, they're supposed to be shitty, but some of them are much shittier than the others because I was rushing through them, you know.
Supposed to be shitty?
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe supposed to be shitty is not the right way to say it, but I'm very well aware of all of the flaws in my comics, and I rather than try to fix them or make them look better, I kind of celebrate that they look shitty.
You've matured, or at least become a better artist. I've read a number of the diary strip collections, and I think you would almost have to actively work to keep being shitty in order to not get better by doing a comic every single day.
That's very true.
You've progressed as an artist, I would say.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I still feel like I can't draw. I mean, I feel like just about every single day something happens in one of the 3 panels where I'm like, shit, that line wasn't supposed to go there. Or, this wasn't, because I always just go straight with a pen. I never use a pencil or anything. And so almost every day I at least fuck up one line.
Obviously, there's a difference between doing a 3-panel strip and covering an entire page, but was part of the pressure that you felt you needed something, I guess, a little meatier than you would just do at a daily strip?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like when there's a good strip in there's some of the pages in the book are very good, and I'm really proud of them. And you can tell it was like, I had this idea and I'm like, oh, this idea is going to be awesome. I can't wait to draw it. I was excited to draw it. I was happy about it. And you can just see it in the finished product. It looks like I wanted to do it. And then you look at the ones where, they're really phoned in and it's like, oh man, nobody's enjoying this. I didn't like it. You don't like it. Why did I even do it?
It looks like he stopped doing the column in 2020 at the time when every single one of us was looking for something to do to fill the time.
Yeah, it's true. I kind of ran out of ideas, you know what I mean? After, however many 15, 17 years or whatever it was I was doing it. At some point, I just kind of ran out of stuff to talk about, and when I started doing it, it was all about, I'm this punk guy and this is all about punk shows and here's punk stuff you can do. And it's like, I'm almost 50 at this point. Like nobody wants to be a 50-year-old punk, I know that sounds terrible, but it's like, I don't know. It's just like when I was a kid, I always thought that the weird 50-year-old dude in the back of the room was weird and creepy, and I don't want to be that dude.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely, especially at the shows, like you don't want to be like the one dude in a room full of 13-year-olds for sure.
Right. And, you can only translate that stuff so much. At some point, like I stopped going to shows. I did stop going to shows. It was, part of it was like because I felt weird and old and creepy. And part of it was like, I don't know, I just kind of got disinterested. It's not as interesting to me as it used to be. And, if I'm not in that punk scene, I can't really like write from the experience of being in the punk scene. And that was another thing is I felt like they should give that space to some young punk kid that like has a bunch of shit to say, like I used to be,
That much was definitely expressed in the last strip.
Right.
Well, I had my time on this earth.
Oh yeah, totally. That's what it, at least in the sense of Razorcake. Yeah.
It's funny though, because I know exactly what you're talking about the old guy in the room. And certainly like there are situations where I have felt like that myself, but aren't you always kind of fascinated by that dude? Aren't you always like fascinated by like the 60-year-old guy who had his like, his leather jacket from like CB's in 1976 and is still hanging out? I mean, I'm sure that dude has seen some stuff and has some stories.
Oh yeah. Definitely that dude is fascinating. I just don't know if I want to be him. You know what I mean?
Punk means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and it's kind of a bit of an abstract idea. Can it be something though that in some way continues to play a role in your life, even if you're not actively like going to shows?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope so. I'm certainly try to still live my life by those standards in that way, But like, I don't know, it's the things that you celebrate when you're young. You celebrate like the freedom of like I don't have a bank account. Who cares? Woohoo! I'm gonna get a tattoo on my face or what. You just do whatever. That freedom, like you can still be that free when you're in your 50s, but it's just kind of sad, like you need to, you get it out of your system. You get to that point where it's like, okay, I'm done being a fuck up. I'm ready to like, raise my credit score up and like be a grown up. And, I definitely, it's difficult to try and balance. Like, am I going to stay punk for whatever staying punk means? Is that so important that I'm going to like, not try to better myself and not try to, you know what I mean? For me, it does reach a point where you have to pick one or the other. You have to stay shitty or like grow up.
To the 15-year-old you, what is ultimately sadder, the idea of a 50-year-old punk or the idea of somebody who is, yeah, mellowing out and settling down and maybe is thinking about his life insurance policy?
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure 15-year-old me would have, absolutely loved to like be this 41-year-old gutter punk dude or whatever. But that's the thing. I mean, it's that's only cool to a 15-year-old. And when you're 45, your other friends that are 45, they don't think it's that cool anymore, I think that's really it. It's like it's about your peer group. When you're 15, you want to impress all the other 15-year-olds and you do stuff, crazy stuff. And then when you're 45, I don't want to maybe not necessarily try to impress the other 45-year-olds, but you're definitely trying to like fit in and like be, you're just trying to like act like a normal person, I guess.
Do you feel like there are things you didn't do or opportunities that you had that you didn't take because at that place in time they weren't punk enough?
I don't think I passed up any opportunities. I mean, I dropped out of college. That was a real left turn. I shouldn't have done that, but yeah, I was too punk, man. I was in a band and we were going to go on tour and I didn't need school. Yeah, I definitely wish I hadn't dropped out of college. I mean, not that I really learned anything in college, but well, no, I take it back. I learned in college that stupid piece of paper that you work for is kind of worth something when you're trying to get a job. I didn't learn any actual knowledge, but other than that, if you want to win the game, so to speak, you have to play by the rules, meaning you have to have a diploma.
But I think about it now in terms of like, people doing their LinkedIn pages, right? And
Right.
it's like anything else. It's like just like looking at something on the internet. There are a few things that you look for first, right? There are those things that catch somebody's eye, and like, if you're a resume in a pile of resumes and you don't have this box to tick off, then like people are going to sort of move on to the next thing. And it's not that it's necessarily that there's anything particularly valuable in just the act of like having a diploma, but it's sort of like, I guess if you're somebody hiring for a job, there are a few things that you look for first.
Yeah, yeah. Something that my dad used to always say is that the main thing that college is for is to show somebody that you can stick with something for 4 years.
How did he take your not being able to stick with it for 4 years?
Oh, he dropped out himself, but yeah. That was always kind of my thing. I was like, well, Dad did it. It's cool,
It was like that Mormon commercial that I learned it from watching you.
Yeah, totally.
Do you feel like you're at a point in your life where it just wouldn't make sense or it's not feasible to sort of go back and try to get a diploma?
I thought about it for a while. I think it's even in the beginning of my last book, The Dog Days of Snake Pit. I was going to go back to community college and I got my transcripts and, started like doing all the, filling out the forms and taking the tests and everything. And the math stuff stressed me out so bad, man. And it get like way worse than when I was a kid, I guess, because I've spent so much time avoiding math specifically. But just the basic math entrance stuff stressed me out so bad that I was just like, fuck this. It's not even worth it. I'd rather just continue my life without a whatever, community college degree.
How serious were you taking music from us? I mean, obviously, like you were taking it seriously as a musician, but like, was there ever a point when it felt like, oh, this is something that I can really do for a while? This is something that I can survive off of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole time I was playing in J Church, like, I mean, we didn't make a lot of money, but it was enough, and we toured enough. We were an active enough band where I could get away with living, working some shitty like part time job, and then like being on the road the rest of the time. And like when you're living that life, that's all you ever want to do. And it's like I'm fine with sleeping on floors till I'm 60. I just want to do this all the time. And then once Lance passed away, and then J Church obviously couldn't do anything else anymore. I kind of tried to keep going. I tried to carry that torch, and use all the skills that I had learned in J Church. I'm going to put them in my own new band. And that was a band called Shanghai River that probably no one's heard of, because the thing that I learned is that, like, you know, you can have all the skills and connection and know all the venues and how to, you know, have the connections and all that stuff. But like, if you just don't know how to write a song good, like nobody cares. And that was the thing. The thing that I lack is the songwriting talent, I guess, that drives a band to be successful.
In a lot of cases, people sort of learn through osmosis or learn from, you know, being around somebody. And you were obviously in a band with somebody who is in a lot of ways was a phenomenal songwriter. You don't feel like that had a an impact on your ability to write your own songs?
It only in the sense that it made me think I could.
Gave you the confidence to
Yeah,
think
it
you
gave
could
me a
do
lot
it.
of false confidence. And you know, I don't know. And then kind of as that began to fizzle out, you know, the bands that I did after J Church were not necessarily as successful, and it made me stop trying so much. And then it just, you know what I mean? It kind of like mellowed into this its own thing. And now I still play music, but it's really just for fun, you know. And I never take it any more seriously than I need to, and I think that's a healthy way to be. But it's also at the same time I spent 20 years fucking around and didn't learn a good trade or anything, you know.
We were talking about the, you know, the kind of the sad old guy, I guess, at the punk show. You know, do you feel like you get like a buffer if you're actually the guy who's in a band? Do you think that that's something that you can keep doing for longer without being sad?
Yeah, there's something about, okay, when you think about that, when you're at the house show and there's a creepy old dude in the corner with a leather jacket, and you're like, oh, okay. But you're at the house show and there's 5 creepy old dudes sitting in a van getting drunk. That's perfectly okay, because you know that they're the band that everyone's there to see. The strength in numbers, you know.
Herd mentality. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, obviously I know you primarily through the comics, but
Mhm.
you know, I know your music too, and I also know your music through the comics. You always seemed like somebody who was in a lot of bands. Was J Church just like, all right, this is the band now? I'm not a guy who's in 15 bands. Like, this is the thing that I'm taking seriously.
No, I was always in lots of bands, just because it's fun. You know, I just like playing. The dynamics of playing with different people is really enjoyable and stuff. J Church is just the only band I've been in that's ever been successful. I think that's really it, you know?
Again, I know them primarily through you, and I know them primarily through your comics. You know, one of the things that surprised me reading the collection of columns is, were they big in Japan?
I guess so. I get, you know, big enough that like we got to tour there twice and everything was paid for. So yeah, I guess in that sense, yeah, and definitely. You know, we had a label in Japan that put out records for us, and the 2 tours we had, you know, they were still punk tours. We were still sleeping on floors and stuff, but it's definitely, yeah, it was, you know, packed houses every night and stuff. It was fun, yeah.
I would assume that's one of the more surreal moments of your life, is going to a city in Japan that you had literally never heard of basically until you got there,
Yeah.
and being in a room where you're playing the song that you had never played before and everybody's singing along. I mean, like, you know, there must be a moment where you're just like, all right, like this is it. Like, this is as good as it gets.
Yeah, yeah, I did feel that night for sure. That was like, I think, when you die, they say your life flashes before your eyes. I'm pretty sure that night's going to be in the flash before my eyes when I die. It was definitely one of the coolest nights of my whole life, for sure.
Were comics ever something that you felt like you could do on a more professional level?
So here's the deal with the comics. Like, when here's the deal with the comics. When
Is that your Neil Hamburger?
yeah. So when I lived in Virginia, I played in this band, and we were on the cusp of like really succeeding. You know what I mean? Or I guess, I don't know. In my eyes, we were reaching that level of like, things were about to go really
Succeeding
big.
by your standards.
Yes, yes. And our drummer like just up and quit out of nowhere, bailed on us, and like, I think it was right before a tour or something. Like, I don't know, just it got to this point where I was so frustrated and I was so mad at this dude, and I was like, I've got to have some kind of art that I do where I'm the only person doing it and I have control and I don't have to like get let down by 3 other dudes constantly. And at the time I was just kind of doing like doodly comics, and I had discovered Jim's journal and kind of got that idea, and like it it kind of, I don't know, it started off as just kind of a goofy thing for fun. And I put out one zine of the first like couple months, and a lot of people liked it. And it kind of clicked then. It was like, oh, maybe I can put all the frustrations I'm having with like not succeeding in music, maybe I can put that into this art, where I've got total control over it, can do whatever I want. And like, that's just kind of how it took off. It was never like, I was like, I'm going to be a comic book artist. It was more like, I need something other than music right now to deal with. And that's how it evolved, I think.
When you first started, were you expecting that anyone was even going to see it?
No. I was making 20 copies of it at Kinko's and just giving them out to my friends and stuff.
What was sort of the threshold there where you're like, oh, this is actually a thing that people who don't know me might enjoy?
Yeah, it was, I don't know, like what would happen is I do a run of 20, 30 copies, and they would instantly go away, and people would keep asking me to go print them again and stuff. And so I kind of decided, I put them together in that first 1 year zine, and then that's the one, I sent out copies for like review at like Maximum Rock and Roll and Punk Planet and Heart Attack and all these great zines that totally don't exist anymore. To you kids out there, these were what we read back in the 90s.
Is Maximum Rock and Roll totally dead?
I think they still exist online, but as a print magazine, no, they don't exist anymore. Yeah, getting reviews, like sending them out for reviews, sending the zine out for reviews, kind of like you would send your band's first 7-inch or something. That was when I kind of felt like, okay, maybe I am going to like take this, more seriously and try to like publish it. Like, I was trying to follow the Comet Bus template of like, be humble so that if you fail, it's no big deal,
Humble in the sense of not looking like you're trying.
Right. And keeping the aesthetic kind of simple and basic. And I guess, yeah, like that. So it's that you don't set the bar too high. You don't set the expectations too high. And then that way, when you do exceed those expectations, everyone's like really impressed with it, because it's like there's a million shitty zines, but then you see a shitty zine with one cool thing in it that's a lot better than everything else. It definitely stands out,
It's funny, the contrast of, again, coming off of this column where a big part of the reason why you stopped doing it is because you felt like you didn't have anything to say. And there are points in the book, because you wrote some footnotes to it, there are points where you're like, oh yeah, this was a month where I literally had nothing to say, and yeah. I was doing something at the last minute. When you were doing this strip, it ultimately didn't matter if you felt like you had something to say.
Right. And that's the thing with the point of the daily strips is that if I don't have anything to say, I still say it. If I have a lot to say, I still say it in 3 panels. It's either stretch out nothing into take the 3 panels or condense a lot down into just 3 panels. And that's always been the important part of the diary comics. And then with the Razorcake comics were different in that, like, I was trying to actually, like I always wanted to like do like recipes or like, how to build your own this or that. I wanted it to be like the kind of comic where someone would like rip the page out and keep it because they could use it as a reference for something. You know what I mean? Like the how to do tattoos one, that was a good one that I was very proud of. Or how to make the inverted gravity bong, stuff like that. Like, I feel like those are useful skills that I can share with people.
The Punkcast diagram was interesting too, because I do think, and you touch on this, that it was definitely taken as a whole your best drawing in the book, and cohesive as a sort of a single piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that from reading the footnotes, that it was something that really stood out to you to such a point where you're like, oh, I need to revisit this and maybe redraw it.
Yeah. So secret spoiler alert, I did redraw it, and it's going to be a bonus page in the book. Yes, it's literally on my computer right now. I'm working on it. So
talking about sort of setting these parameters for yourself, and I assume that like setting parameters for yourself is super important when you're going to sit down and do something every single day, regardless of whether you have something to talk about or, if you wake up feeling like shit. I mean, ultimately, is it more difficult to do a 3-page panel if you have too much to say or not enough?
It's honestly harder if I've got too much, because I have to really pick and choose like what are the important things that I really want to say about what happened today. That's definitely much harder, because stretching out nothing is pretty easy. If you play a video game, you just draw yourself playing a video game or whatever. It's that part's very easy. It's definitely condensing the exciting days into just 3 panels. It's hard.
Was the drawing nothing, was it that way from the beginning? I mean, did you feel early on when you started doing it that, like, maybe if nothing happened that day, then it just wasn't worth sitting down and drawing?
Oh no, no, no. Always from yeah, from the very first day, I always knew like especially if nothing happens, there's a reason to draw a comic.
What does that mean?
So like, are you familiar with Jim's Journal? Yeah. So I completely ripped that off. That's 100% like Snake Pit is a 100% rip off of Jim's Journal, except for that. When I found out that Jim's Journal was fictional, that's when I kind of got my idea like, oh, I'll do this for real. But the beauty of Jim's Journal is the ones where like literally nothing. Like my favorite one is the one where he's just sitting in a chair for all three panels and goes, "I didn't do anything today," and then like no other words in the whole thing. I still to this day think that's the greatest comic that's ever been drawn.
Is it a case where you feel like in order to have done it successfully that you needed the momentum of doing it every single day, that it would have just fallen by the wayside if you didn't make a concerted effort, again, regardless of what happened or how you felt, that you would sit down and draw it?
Maybe, but I also really think that like I've always been a fan of projects that are done very very small increments at a time. Like you do every day for 3 whole years and then you have a book. I love that kind of thing. And so I think the important part to me is that I have every day documented no matter what. And like except for the one day that my dog died in the last book, like I've drawn every day. And like and in that point, like the not drawing the comic was kind of the point, and in itself kind of was the comic for that day. But I definitely think it's important for my format that I've created to like be sure every day is in there.
How much of it is really just structuring your day? I obviously I've known this implicitly in some form or another, but like one of the things that really got driven home to me in the past year when things got super weird, and I was somebody who was going into the office for work and somebody who traveled a lot for work,
Mm-hmm.
is sort of the importance of routine, especially now that I am working from home. It's really kind of blurred the lines
Yeah.
in probably an unhealthy way
Right.
between
Right.
work and my personal life. How useful has it been having this thing that you do every single day?
Extremely useful. I can, first of all, it's like a daily, like it's like brushing your teeth or something. Like if I didn't do it, I can, it feels wrong. And I'm like, oh, I forgot to do this today, and then it's also really useful to have every day of your life documented. An example that I always tell is, many years ago when I was working at Sound Exchange, uh, my boss gave me a raise, and I got my paycheck and I'm like, oh, hey, my raise didn't show up on the paycheck. He's like, oh, I gave it to you on this day. And I'm like, oh, no, wait. And I like literally pulled the zine off the counter and opened it up to the day I got the raise. I'm like, no, look, you gave it to me on this day. And he's like, oh, you're right. And he gave me like, retroactive for 2 weeks or whatever. But yeah, that sort of thing is very useful. We're like, oh, what did I do last year at this time? And I can just go and look, it's very helpful.
It has to take on a different meaning when you know that a fair number of people are going to see it.
Yeah, something that people all the time are like, "Oh, I know so much about you," and my answer is like, "Well, you know the things I want you to know about me." There's of course, like anybody, there's lots of stuff that happens that doesn't go in the comic, because it's either it's personal or I didn't feel like sharing it, or for whatever reason.
I've interviewed a ton of people who do autobiographical comics over the years, and the things that really jump out to people reading them are the things that are super personal, are the people who like really kind of get into the, like you mentioned, like Julia Wirtz, who I'm guessing is a mutual friend of ours, and she goes into some pretty embarrassing stuff in some of her strips.
Yeah.
Do you feel like having done it for as long as you have, that it's made you sort of, I don't know if braver is the right word, but more willing to disclose stuff?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, definitely in the early days of the comic, when there was I would say between 2001 and maybe 2007 or so, those first 5 or 6 years that I did the comic, it was the most important thing in the world to me. And I would deliberately make stupid decisions in life because I knew that they would make good comics.
What's an example?
Oh, I don't know. Like, so like one time I was, it was in Minneapolis. I was staying in Minneapolis for like, I was a house guest of some friends and they were letting me stay with them for a few weeks, it was a summer, and I'm eating breakfast in a diner, and Patty from Dillinger 4 walks in and he's like, hey, you want to go to Milwaukee right now? And I'm like, okay. So I just jumped in the van, like directly from breakfast. My bike was still locked up outside. Like, I didn't have a jacket or anything. I jumped in the van and I didn't get back to Minneapolis for 2 months. I was gone for 2 months with no, no toothbrush, no change of clothes, no nothing. I had to I definitely remember shoplifting boxer shorts on that trip.
Super impulsive, probably kind of stupid in a certain way, but like also it's kind of badass.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun, and that was the thing. And I knew it would make great comics. Number one, and number two, it was fun. But it definitely, I would say that the comic and the idea that whatever happens, I'm going to share this with everybody. Definitely back in those days, it pushed me to do dumber stuff or make more rash, quick decisions. But I don't have any regrets about any of those things that I did.
Having been in so many bands and touring around so much that that maybe you weren't tied to a specific place in the way that you are now.
Oh yeah, definitely. That had a lot to do with it. Also, meeting my wife and settling down and getting married. That's also was a big part of it.
Grown up stuff.
She didn't want me to be on tour all the time, and I didn't want to be on tour all the time because I missed her. So that definitely had a big part of it too.
You have a conversation when somebody like becomes an important part of your life of just like, yeah, this is you're gonna be in the comic. It's just there's there's no way around it, right?
Yeah. That's actually, yes, with every person I've been close with, I kind of go out of my way to show them the comic and be like, make sure they know about it and be like, hey, if you get involved with me, you're going to be part of this. So, make sure you're cool with it, and I have always asked permission for people like that, maybe not always. I think there might've been one or two times that I am in trouble for it. I do apologize for those times.
Is asking permission an act of just like upfront? You're like, you ask permission once and it's like, all right, you're a character now, or is it really every time?
Oh yeah, it would just be once, but it would be sort of only for someone who I might be sharing personal information about, Like if it's just like I was at a party and there was a guy named Bob there and I draw Bob in there, like, no, I don't ask Bob for permission.
Asking once versus like your wife, for example, every time something sort of like verges on the personal, do you feel like you need to sort of get her permission?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, that's just an implicit understanding with us, though, I think is, we're both comfortable. She knows what I would and wouldn't share, and she's comfortable with that.
Do you feel like there are times in hindsight that maybe you crossed a line?
Yes, absolutely. Without a doubt. There's a specific instance in mind. I don't want to name any names, but I definitely, I crossed the line and pissed a lot of people off.
Was that early on, or?
Yeah, it was in, I can at least tell you the book. It was in Life in a Jugular Vein. It's in that book. That's all I'll tell you.
I think that was the first one of yours I read. That was a pretty early one.
Yeah, it was the second one.
The nature of it being an early one is that like you're probably, in a lot of ways, you're probably still sort of figuring out what the lines were.
Right. Yeah. And that's like those early ones, nothing had been really nothing had been like officially published really or anything, and so there's also that I didn't realize that these comics were going to be like in bound books that would be like in the Library of Congress and shit.
You've still been doing it throughout the pandemic?
Yep, still never missed a day since 2001.
Do you update them daily online, or
Oh, no, I never share them anywhere until the book comes out. So every 3 years a book comes out, meaning Dog Days came out in 2018 or 2019. Oh, you're making me do math, man. Next year, the next book will come out.
And it's going to include all the pandemic
stuff?
stuff?
Yeah. It'll be moving to California, all the stuff that I've done, since a lot of interesting. The next book's going to be very, very interesting. A lot of cool shit happened to me.
You had Jim's journal. And for me, like the first diary strip I remember really getting super invested in that I was reading every day was when James Kolchaka was doing his.
Yeah, for sure. That was I would say he was a huge influence on me, but technically I was doing, no. He was doing them a couple years before me, but I actually had never seen his journal comics when I started mine. But then when I found them, I'm like, oh yeah, holy shit, this is amazing.
Probably like a lot or most people, I was reading them online as they happened, and then maybe like get a book after that. Obviously, you have a website and have that access. Is there a reason why you continue to release them that way?
Yes, there is, but I don't know if I could actually explain it. There's no real reason. It's an arbitrary thing that I've just decided for whatever reason. I don't know why, because it's not like I'm some Luddite that doesn't embrace technology and stuff. I just, for whatever reason, for these comics, I really want them to only exist on paper. I really don't like, and like, one of my older publishers, I found out a few years ago, like put them up on, put like ebook versions up for sale. And I got really mad and was like, dude, take these down. I do not want ebooks ever. And the only exception I made is the new book. I let them put it in libraries for free, like as ebooks, but that's it. Like I don't know. I don't know why. There's no reason. There's no like justifiable reason I can think of as to why I'm so anti-digital comics for my specific comics, but I am, and I really don't know why.
Do you think that there's value in having that time period between the actual incident and when people are able to actually sort of sit down and take it in?
Oh yes, that's definitely really helpful. Like I don't know, there's been times where I might have said something mean about somebody, and if they had seen that within the week of me drawing it, it would have been a very dramatic episode. But 3 years later, they completely forgot that it happened and it's fine. There's definitely that nice buffer. When I used to do the zine, just the small zines, even that sometimes people would be like, oh, this is just like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, shit, like it was still, even that was a little too soon. Like I definitely enjoy that 3 year buffer.
I think part of it too is it's one of those things that if I've ever tried to describe your comic to people, it's been hard to. I'm going to say this is going to come out bad, but I promise it's in a nice way.
No worries.
But it's hard. It's sort of hard to verbalize like the appeal of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like you said that like you're not the world's best drawer, and like some days the drawings are better than others, and it is something that in a lot of ways just completely embraces some extremely mundane things. And I think it's maybe a thing that can only be, we have a word for it now because everybody's watching TV shows on Netflix, but like before Netflix, it was a kind of binging.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you get a sense of why it works better as sort of a longer sequential work than any of the sort of individual pieces?
So this is going to sound weird, but some guy one time, this was, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, sent me a copy of like his college thesis or some like really important paper that he had written for school. And the paper was about the perception of time passage in my comics. I swear to God, dude, this guy like for like his college like thesis, he did this. But it and I understand it. It was talking about how, when you read my comics, when you read the 3 year books, it almost like this, I feel like an asshole saying this, but it's true. It kind of like induces a trance state. That's kind of the idea of like you're just repetitively going through each day, and months happen. You watch a month unfold in like 5 minutes. You watch a year unfold in an hour. And like that constant repetition and just reading it, and you like just are flipping the pages mindlessly. You're not really remembering what happened in each strip. You're just kind of skimming it almost, because that's kind of the point. And it really does kind of induce a trance state. It's I don't know. I know I sound like an asshole for saying that, but I've always been proud of that feeling. I'm proud that I've been able to, and I've had other people tell me that they feel that way too when they read them.
It's like meditative. Is that the word?
Maybe. But like, like when you listen to like droney music, it's like one riff over and over again, like Lungfish or a band like that, where like the repetition actually kind of like you start to see patterns, like larger patterns in the repetition. Philip Glass, somebody said that like my comics reminded them of Philip Glass music. Again,
it's quite a compliment.
Yeah, I know. Again, I feel like a fucking pretentious asshole saying this kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, they're shitty comics about nothing that aren't even drawn well.
You use the word shitty before to describe them. In a certain sense, is that part of like the deflecting or the sort of the playing down? Like, do you feel like the playing down that you did when you first started, that you sort of have to do that, and maybe that's sort of a defense mechanism of not seeming or feeling like you're taking them too seriously yourself?
Yeah, that's very apt. The other thing though is it adds another level of it's what makes the comics funny, if that makes sense. Like the comics are never intended to be funny, and like a lot of times people are like, oh, I read your book, it's really funny, like obviously you didn't read the book. what I do think the one thing that does make my comics funny is how shitty the drawings are, you know? And like, I love, one of my favorite things to do is that breaking down that fourth wall where I'll like actually comment in the comic about how shitty the drawing is. Like, I love doing that. And it's never something that, like, I never intentionally draw anything shitty. Like, that's kind of the thing that people may not realize is that like I'm still trying as hard as I can.
I don't think anybody thinks you're like that you're intentionally doing it shitty, but I think that it's also just like, I mean, I never really thought about it this way because you are doing it on that same day. There's a pretty good chance that the reason why that art is shittier than another day is a reflection on something that's happened to you in that day.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's definitely true. There's the one there's one strip in the first book that everyone always points out where I was like literally blackout drunk when I drew it, and it like looks like a little child drew it. It's the worst drawing in the whole book, and like I love it, you know. Um, but yeah, that like that's if I couldn't have possibly drawn that intentionally, you know, I had to be blackout drunk for it to look like that.
I mean, it's probably overstated, you know, this idea of sort of like making art as like catharsis or therapy.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some truth to it, but that's probably unavoidable when you're doing it every single day. I mean, is, you know, in a sense, is this just a method you have now for processing something that's happened in a day?
Yes, for sure. I've never, I mean, I definitely feel like it is therapeutic for me, and I've never felt personally the need to like seek out therapy or anything. And I think having this comic is a big reason why. You know, it's something that I said in an interview a long time ago was that like it's hard to get like when you've lost your job and you've been evicted from your house, it's hard to get super stressed when you look and there's this shitty little cartoon man that's going, I don't have a job. You know, it's like it definitely helps like ground me a little bit, you know, when I get really upset about something, when you draw it out as a shitty comic, it, you know, it doesn't seem as important. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's kind of counterintuitive though, right? Because it doesn't seem as important when you're drawing it, but in a sense, the act of sitting down and drawing something is making it more permanent. You know, especially if you're sitting down and drawing something that's going to be in a book going out to thousands of people.
Right.
You're kind of enshrining it in a weird way.
Yeah, but I think in the sense that like on the days where nothing happens, I'm putting that same amount of work into the documenting of it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So if like it's a shitty day, nothing happens, I do the same amount of drawing that it's a bad day where I'm really upset or a great day where I'm really happy. And I think that also kind of helps me like regulate my emotions in that way, you know?
It gives you perspective on stuff in hindsight.
For sure, for sure.
What role has it played in your life over the past year?
You know, everyone picked up a new hobby during the pandemic, and one that I picked up was jigsaw puzzles. I got really into jigsaw puzzles. And so I decided to draw one. And I don't know if you followed, but last summer I
saw on Facebook. Yeah.
I released a jigsaw puzzle, and like that was really fun. You know, the idea of like finding a place to manufacture it and getting them ordered, and they had, you know, they got shipped over from China, and I fulfilled all the orders myself. And like that was like a really fun project. And I absolutely could not have done it if I hadn't spent 20 years building up the following that I have, you know, otherwise nobody would have wanted to buy this puzzle because it's a shitty drawing because I drew it, you know? But I think that, you know, the fact that I have a fan base and they like my shitty drawings and they will buy my shitty drawings. I mean, you know, especially this time, you know, when like, you know, people are so bored and they want something to do and whatever, I feel like it's definitely helping out like that. Like, you know, my publisher said that he's sold a lot of my books, more of my books than usual during the pandemic, you know.
Day to day, as you're, you know, living through this, as we all were,
Mm-hmm.
did the nature of the strip and the role it plays in your life change?
It changed. Okay, so I think the biggest change is, you know, I also started working from home, and now I can draw my comics while I'm on the clock, and so I kind of take a little bit longer with them. Like I think you'll notice that the comics from this year are going to be a little bit better drawn than most because you know, I'm just sitting here. You know, the way my job works is I there's a lot of downtime and I'm just sitting there. And I'm like, I'm getting paid for this. I might as well start drawing. And you know, I've got lots, when it used to be like, I did it in my spare time, I would try to get it over with so I could go on and do my shit for the day. But like when I'm on the clock at work, I feel like it's okay to like take my time. So yeah, I'm actually, now that you mention it, I didn't really think about that till just now, but like I think everyone's going to notice that when the next book comes out.
Is there a specific time in the day when you, obviously it changes from day to day depending on what you're doing, but like, is there kind of a general time that you have carved out to work on it?
Yeah, usually in the mornings. I will draw the previous day the next morning usually. Yeah, but yeah, I usually wait for the whole day to finish because you never know if you're like, oh, today have a, and then like at like 9:30 at night something crazy happens. You're like, shit, I already drew the comic for the day.
As you're walking through the day, how much headspace is knowing that the next morning you're gonna have to do a strip? How much brain power are you kind of just occupied trying to figure out what that one thing is?
Oh, almost none. A lot of time, yeah, I don't even think about it. A lot of times it's just, I'll sit and like always the comic has always been technically an answer to the question of what'd you do today, you know? And that's, I'll sit down and I'm like, what did I do yesterday? Well, I worked. And then after I finished working, I played the guitar for a little bit and I like, took the dog for a walk. I'm like, okay, those are 3 things. That's good. And boom. I just think of 3 things. And sometimes, it does happen where like I've drawn it and I'm like, shit, I also did that day. Oh, well, whatever, whatever. If it's super, super important, I'll put it in the next day and maybe pretend that it happened that day or something. But, that's very rare that happens.
What are you doing for work these days?
Yeah, I moved to San Francisco. I don't know if you're aware of that. Like, yeah, so
you were in Austin for a while.
Yeah, I lived in Austin for 20 years. And then my wife got a really good job here in San Francisco. And so we moved here in December of 2019. And so I went from Manor, Texas, a tiny little suburb of Austin, out in the country in Texas, population 8,000 people, small little town. I moved from there to San Francisco, and then a month into it, the fucking pandemic happens. So it's really weird. I live in this major city that don't really know any of the people of. It's super weird. I've been to I love, walking around the city, and during pandemic is crazy because the streets are empty and you're walking around like a zombie movie. And I've gotten to explore the whole city and it's really beautiful, but I haven't seen any people. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? It's the most surreal way to experience a city, and it's really weird. But anyway, when we moved here, I got a job just like, through like ZipRecruiter or whatever. And it's I had to sign an NDA, so I can't really say, but it's basically just a lot of sitting in front of a computer, like monitoring a job queue. That's all it is. It's really boring, easy work, and it pays pretty good. So
we were all kind of forced to become sedentary, but it sounded like you were heading in that direction from the standpoint of like, again, you just maybe weren't playing music as much as you used to. And obviously you weren't just like getting up and going to a show every night. Do you know what you want to be when you grow up?
Nope. When, as far as day jobs go, for the last 10 years, I've been working in the printing business and like commercial print shops. And I really loved that work, especially like I started doing like wide format printing, like, printing like big banners and like, trade shows shit and stuff like that. And like, I really, really enjoyed that work very, very much. And, when we moved, I was kind of bummed that I was leaving my job, and I was trying to find a job doing that. Basically the job that I have now was just the first thing that came along, and I took it. And the whole idea was like, oh, this is my placeholder job while I look for like something that I want to do. But then the pandemic started, and it's like, I'm lucky to have a job. I'm just going to stick with it. And so that's where I'm at now. And like, there's talk that we might return to the office in June. And if I do, like once I go back to the office and things go back to normal, I probably will just try to find a real job that I like. Because it's not that I mind this job, but it's really just a placeholder for now. And just due to the pandemic, I'm just kind of letting it sit like it is.
Do you get a sense that the daily strip is something that you're going to do for as long as you, I guess, can, physically put pen to paper?
Yes. I've always, ever since I first started, I was like, I'm going to do this every day. Like the last strip that I ever draw is going to be like, tomorrow I'm going skydiving, or it's going to be like, boy, having cancer really sucks. Like it's going to be one of those two.